Today marks 2 years since South Africa was first put under lockdown due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Economist Azar Jammine joins us this evening as we look at the massive impact on the economy. Thank you very much, Mr. Jammine, for your time. As always, great to speak to you. So 2 years on, what's been the quantifiable economic impact of lockdown in its various forms?
Firstly, economic growth has recovered somewhat after the initial impact, which was to see the economy contracting by 6.4% in 2020, recovering by 4.9% in 2021. So we're still a little short of where we were prior to the onset of the COVID-19 crisis. A lot depends on which sector of the economy one is looking at. There are some sectors that have been far worse affected than others. Obviously, your tourism, hospitality, many of the services sectors have been very badly affected. Others less so, and in fact, a few have obviously benefited from this. From a different perspective, we saw 2 million jobs being lost and estimated. All these estimates are estimated figures. 2 million jobs being lost, formal and informal. And around 600,000 of those have been regained, depending on, whether you're looking at formal sector employment or informal employment. The fact is that fewer people are working now than was the case prior to the onset of the COVID-19 crisis. What has been very conspicuous, however, is the fact that the crisis affected poorer people a lot worse than the middle income and upper income sectors of the population. Those who have education and skills are by and large still in their jobs. It's people who were involved in unskilled types of jobs in the informal sector, many of them, and unskilled people in the formal sector who bore the brunt of the loss of jobs and have not been able to necessarily regain them, or are now earning lower incomes than previously. And for those who have been working in sectors that have benefited from the lockdown, especially in the IT arena, there are quite a few who are doing better than before.
We'd been quite hopeful and talking about recovery, and of course then came the conflict in Ukraine, and we cannot pretend that that's not going to have a further impact on South Africa's economy. So close on the heels of COVID-19, what does the overall picture look like in terms of the setback for our recovery?
There can be no doubt that this Ukraine invasion and the effects on the world economy are fairly dramatic. In South Africa's case, ironically, the impact in the short term might not be as detrimental as is the case for most other economies. And that is because South Africa possesses some of the minerals that Russia produces, and so we are able to benefit from higher prices and possibly even to take over and gain some of the production that the Russians might lose as a result of economic sanctions. However, it will hit the man in the street. Again, I'm afraid that whilst the overall impact may not be that bad, poorer people will be negatively affected by virtue of higher fuel prices and higher food prices. With food, there is now the added fear of a shortage of supplies of wheat and sunflower from the Ukraine. And not that we import a lot of food. We are fortunately one of the relatively small number of food self-sufficient countries in the world, and therefore won't be as negatively affected. But the poor will face, the whole population will face higher prices, and that is something that hits the poor find it more difficult to keep up with higher prices than those who are in employment and can find other means of survival. But it's also very important to mention, whilst talking about COVID-19, is that the South African economy was already in decline for over a decade prior to the onset of the COVID crisis. So yes, it exacerbated the economic downturn, but we were already losing out quite badly. And all hope now must be that we embark upon the structural reforms that are needed to try and uplift our economic growth rate from a more sustainable point of view. But in the short term, for South Africa, the Ukraine invasion will have some effect, but not as bad as in many other countries. My fear is that the longer-term effect for the world economy could be very negative, and by virtue of that, you could ultimately see those higher commodity prices falling back, in which case we would then also start suffering as well.
Coming back to the local picture, is there any good news for South Africans financially?
Well, as I've mentioned, the very good news, and we've seen it in the form of the strengthening rand, is that the rest of the world is looking at us as a bit of a safe haven in a time like this, by virtue of the fact that the prices of palladium, rhodium, gold, and most importantly, coal have actually been rising quite sharply. And unlike what is the case in many other countries where they are struggling to have to pay more and more for oil, we are going to be earning more foreign exchange from those other minerals than we will be paying extra for our oil. So we will not be necessarily as badly affected. And also, we need not see our inflation rate rising as steeply as many other countries, and therefore our interest rates may also not rise as much as in other countries. I know it's the best of a bad bunch, but that's just to give a little bit of a ray of hope. Relatively speaking, we may not be quite as badly off as many others. And of course, if one starts contemplating a nuclear conflagration overseas, what better place of safety than far away from it all, as South Africa is.
Absolutely doesn't bear thinking about. That would be horrific. Just for investors locally, people tend to make knee-jerk reactions when they're watching the world news. What would your advice be to South African investors about either sticking to their guns or moving their money around?
Well, clearly, sticking to their guns is a good idea. Those who want to take money overseas, this is a wonderful time because you've got a very strong currency. If you want to do that. But really, the South African economy is not about to collapse right now. It's one can only hope that politically there is the will to embark upon the structural reforms that the president keeps talking about as the intentions of the government. Because if we embark upon those, there's a lot of money waiting out there that would stream into this country, especially in current circumstances geopolitically, where we could be seen as a safe haven. But then the kind of action that our government has been taken in terms of not condemning the atrocities and the invasion of Ukraine the way it ought to be, is also not playing into the hands of potential investors, favorably into the hands of potential investors either.
Thank you, as always, for your insights. That was Economist Azar Jammine.